What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. We got another episode of Team Hold Racing here. James and I are going to be talking a little bit about the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix, some more chaos in the F1 world. Enough so that we get a week off. We get a week off to just take in the chaos before our next race, right?
Absolutely. Chaos everywhere. Operation Chaos.
Right. Why don't you want to just dive into to last week's race and what were some of the key takeaways?
Yeah, Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Pretty much qualifying. We had Max on pole, of course, as usual. Getting to see a kind of a routine here. It's not too exciting.
Yeah.
But then we get, in the race, Max 1, Perez 2, Leclerc 3. Looks like they had the solid measure of Ferrari all the way through the race. No real challenges. That's an interesting track. As we talked a little bit about last time, you got some question with safety issues because the number of blind corners on it, and
Right.
it's extremely fast. I think they came up. I think it during qualifying they set one of the. I think it's the record for like a street course, the fastest street course
Oh, wow.
in ever. Because a lot of the street courses tend to be more windy, narrow and stuff. This is kind of a quasi street course because it's kind of purpose built, but it's not completely purpose built. They take it apart every year, so it's a little bit more like Australia, where it's not like you're going through the downtown, Baku like they do
Right.
for the Azerbaijani Grand Prix, or Monaco, obviously, which is a perfect example of a street circuit.
Hmm.
But it's a part of it's special built, and some of it is roads that they close off during the race. So, but yeah, for street circuit, it was the highest, quickest street circuit ever qualifying lap. Let's see. Red Bull not really challenged. Are we looking at a 23 season repeat here with
Yeah,
this?
I mean, they do feel like just a class above. I mean, even as the race was unfolding, like we talked about it a little bit last week, right? Where it is to the point where I'm not even sure if they're showing us like their full deck yet.
Well, exactly. I was going to say that. The question is when teams are getting closer, and teams will. I mean, because teams will basically improve throughout the year. You see that over the years. You saw
Right.
last year Aston Martin do the opposite. They actually got worse during the year because they had some technical upgrades that didn't seem to track right when they put them on the car versus what the wind tunnel was telling them. And Aston Martin fell back. If you remember,
Mm-hmm.
they were pushing Red Bull right at the start, and Fernando was getting podium after podium at the start of the season. But as the year went on, not so much podiums for Aston. They started falling back, and then mid-season McLaren got it right, and McLaren from mid-season on scored more points than any other team except, well, Red Bull, of course, because Red Bull was Red Bull winning most of the races. So McLaren moved themselves up to, I think it was fourth in the championship after not, after finishing like 17th and 19th in Miami in the fifth race.
Mm.
So they really got it right mid-season, and the thing, as they say, the car that goes to the grid on the first race will not be the car that you drive that crosses the finish
Right.
line at the last race. They are very different cars because they're changed, they're upgraded, they're improved, hopefully. And if they're not improved, then they're definitely changed because you're throwing stuff at them just to try to make them better, whether you're successful doing it or not.
So, but is that what you think Red Bull is doing? Like, do you think Red Bull is probably keeping some stuff behind the curtain here?
I'm sure they pretty much are, and it's also the question of there's stuff that they may have in the idea bank that they
Hmm.
haven't pulled out because of cost cap, and it's like, well, look, if we don't need to do this, we'll move this into 25 development work rather than 24 upgrade work. If we're
Right.
not needing to push these things or try these new ideas that we've got, because I'm sure that once these cars get released, there's still 1,000 things that they didn't try, or a
Right.
hundred things they didn't try, they didn't have time or money for, or they thought, well, that's probably, it's maybe not the best use of our money, but let's maybe spend some wind tunnel cycles on it for the 25 car if we've got some extra cycles to spend on them, type
Yeah.
of thing. So yeah, there may be very much stuff in the bank, whereas other teams are frantically working on upgrades, and McLaren seems to be in a similar position, though they're much better right now than they were at the start of last year. But they do seem to be in a position where they know their car will get better, or they suspect their car will get better during the year. They've got their upgrades planned on when they're going to be bringing some more stuff, and even Ferrari says they're going to be bringing some upgrades to Imola when they come back to Europe in about a month, give or take.
Yeah. I was gonna say McLaren's probably gonna be feeling pretty good after the first two races. I think with like Piastri's performance, because even when he did really well in qualifying, right? I believe he finished fifth in qualifying, and I was curious to be like, oh, did he just run well in qualifying, or is this a car that's going to compete? And for him to even like pick up a spot throughout, because he finished fourth, I believe.
Yeah.
And then for Lando, who's probably a little disappointed, but still to have both cars in the points. They weren't really challenging Ferrari and Red Bull, but maybe if Sainz was racing, it would have been a different story. But I gotta feel like, considering where they were heading into this season, they should probably feel pretty good.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But after last year, because of the fact they were basically number two in the second half, they think they
Mm.
should be challenging Red Bull. And I think that's when I take that. I mean, that's the context that they
Yeah,
think that they should be chasing Red Bull down and should be not dominating Ferrari, but they should be consistently ahead of Ferrari
yeah,
and Mercedes. I mean, that's what they think. Because remember, they did. I don't know if they beat Mercedes last year or not from the factory team, but yeah, I mean that's what they think. That's what Zach is, looking at. It was just funny because I remember I started watching DTS last night. I got through
yeah,
I think the first half of the first four episodes, and it's interesting because I remember it's funny because I remember things that we talked about during last year, and I remember saying, like, I think it was after Miami, I brought up the point, or maybe you brought up about, well, what about Zach? What about Zach's future? And
yeah,
you see him, sitting in their very comfortable meetings with his boss, with the Google executives that have been
yeah.
throwing a bunch of money. That was just, he's just sitting there trying to sell them, and they're going like, you can see them when they get up after Zach leaves, looking at each other, going like, man, are we getting BS here or what? Is
Right.
this guy really got a plan?
I found the conversation specifically with Google was the one that I like. That was the only one I cringed at. Like, whatever. Everybody has conversations with their boss that get a little contentious, or like, yeah, I got to perform a little bit better, like that.
Yeah,
But to then have to talk to the people giving you money, being like, no, I swear to God, we're gonna turn this
yeah.
around.
We have a plan. See, we got a
Yeah,
plan.
yeah. That one was a tough watch.
Like Google's going like, do you have a plan? And it's like, because I mean, I'm assuming these guys are generally, scientist guys,
Yeah,
programmers, stuff that have moved up in the ranks. Very, very smart people,
sure.
but that know how things work like this. And it's like, wow,
Right,
car racing, it's like, you're talking about such a small difference versus a huge programmatic difference that we
right,
could make to make our algorithm better or something. So
right, right.
don't know. Yeah. I mean, hopefully they're racing fans but obviously it did pay off
Yeah,
because they
yeah,
did
and
move it up and they did get a lot of time. What they want is what those guys want is obviously a winner, but they want a car that gets on camera. I mean, that's what
right.
they want. And there's firms out there that track that stuff, that tell you the value of your sponsorship based on the number of seconds that your car appears on air. That was a big analysis. I had a friend that used to work in NASCAR that he would always that he would use that data to go to customers and
So,
potential sponsors.
So does that mean like Alpine got they were happy with the camera footage that they got for Gasly immediately being removed?
No, I don't think so. That was not the stuff they're kind of looking for. Yeah, we'll get to Alpine, but man, that thing is a train wreck.
It
And
is.
and it actually, you know what? It may work out well for America. And like I said, we'll explain that a little
Right,
bit
right.
later in the show. But yeah, there's nothing that's really looking like Red Bull's going to be, this challenge at this point. They can slip up. You never know. Um, we're probably going to get any upgrades because of the way this season's starting. I think we're starting with 5 remote races, overseas
Mhm.
races, because next we go to Australia, then they go to Japan, then they go to China, then I think they come back for the Emilia Abalia
Okay.
at Imola, the one that was flooded out last year.
Oh, right, right.
It was, yeah, we didn't have that last year, so I think that's gonna be the 6th race. I think that's when the teams will start bringing updates, just because the road races are really hard, or the traveling races are really, they call them traveling races. I know they traveled all of them, but
Right,
they call
right.
the traveling races. It's really hard to get stuff there, and generally the thing is, if you can't, like, they will. I mean, some of those guys will literally, they will drive stuff from their home um, factories to
Right,
Italy from England.
right.
So if there's a part or something breaks, they need an additional part. They'll basically drive it over there overnight. They'll send somebody in a van, and it happens all the time. You can't
Yeah.
do that when you're in China. You can put something
No.
on a FedEx, and there have been times where I know that they've. I remember Bernie Collins talking about when she went to some overseas race when she was working for Aston Martin. She checked the nose component in as her checked baggage, and walks out of baggage claim with like part of a front main plane or something off of a wing,
That's
because they needed to
wild.
get it over there, and it was a new part that they needed to get over there for testing, or for they were going to put on the car for the race. So
That's
those
wild.
strange things happened over time. But yeah, I don't really expect major upgrades. So pretty much the cars you got now are the same cars we're going to see in Australia, China, and Japan, and they'll start changing. There may be little bits they can put on there, but I wouldn't expect major aero changes until then. And again, once they launch the car, they're working frantically. Mercedes, I know, team Mercedes is working frantically on them. I assume Alpine is whoever's still there to turn the lights on and do the
Yeah.
work is trying it. And so we'll have to see how those work out. But moving on, I think one of the things we have to look at is, of course, Ollie Berman, who would probably be the star
Yep.
of the race, for his abilities and what he did as a jump in. I guess they said when they interviewed Fred Vasseur, I think they let him know at about 2:00 in the afternoon on which would have been Friday,
Friday.
which
Yeah.
yeah, just before FP3 started, I think around 5 or 6. So I think
Hmm.
the kid had all of 3 or 4 hours to realize you're going to be making your F1 debut in FP3. You get an hour to familiarize with the car, and you're jumping into qualifying. So and we're Ferrari, and you better dang do well, because
Right.
you're in a car that's challenging Leclerc for the best of Ferrari. So
And
yeah, you
his performance was so impressive. I know he ended up getting voted driver of the week, but I was really stunned by that, and it made me start thinking about, like, because I know we've talked about it with Danny and Yuki, and gosh, what's the in the wings with that one?
Liam Lawson.
Liam Lawson, right there. How much talent there is, like, right beneath the surface. Where I'm like that, because Ollie. I mean, granted, he had a Ferrari car, but he proved he should be out there, and Liam proved he should be out there in the races that he had. So it's just there's
Yeah,
just
most definitely.
so much talent that is like bursting to get through.
Oh yeah, and the thing, and like I said, this is a really weird season. You have no changes on the grid.
Right.
And don't forget, Aston Martin's got Dragovic, which is a former F2 champion. And we
Mhm.
saw what happened to Nick DeVries, who was an F2 champion and a Formula E champion, who got run out after 11 races at Red
Yeah.
Bull for not performing at RBR for not performing last year. So yeah, no, it's cutthroat. Red Bull only seems to be the team that really is interested in making mid-season changes.
Hmm.
They're pretty much, they're pretty cutthroat about, sink or swim in
Yeah.
there. And if they don't see something, they're not willing, they're not, you know, oh, mid-season, nope, don't care. We'll throw somebody else in the cart. I threw Daniel in, of course, because of his
Right.
experience. So
Right.
they probably wouldn't they probably wouldn't throw Yuki out mid-season for Liam Lawson.
No, but didn't
So
they do it? I remember. Did they do it with Albon? Like 5 years
yeah,
ago, 4 years
well,
ago.
no, that was a swap. They sent him to the lower team,
Right.
and then they cut. Well, no, Albon got promoted from the lower team into Red Bull, and then he didn't get renewed at the end of the
Oh,
season,
that's
two
what it was.
seasons
Yeah.
later. But Gasly got demoted from the main team back to
Okay.
the minor team, shall we say, the
Okay.
second team. And
All
so
right.
yeah, that they have done that in that one.
Wow.
So I think that's when they promoted Albon and they pushed Gasly back.
Yeah.
So yeah, so they will do that. They don't necessarily cut them loose. There was just nowhere for DeVries to go other than he was already on the second team when they cut him loose. So, but no, Berman. I mean, I think he gets 5 gold stars for that effort. I think the funniest thing was watching his dad. His dad
Yeah.
I didn't know his poor dad was going to survive the
Yeah.
qualifying session. It was almost painful because the guy was just at one so proud, so excited for his son, but
Right.
just going and because that course is tight. I mean,
Oh,
because like I said, as fast as they go, they push it right to the walls in some cases.
right.
And there's a couple of weird corners there, like we'll talk about later with Albon and Kevin Magnussen, where the corner kind of comes out at you as you go into it, like
Right.
it cuts in, and it's like you think the corner would cut away from you, not into you, and it kind of makes you kind of replace the car and move the car over a
Yeah. And
little
there, I
bit.
mean, there was a couple of times too where if you don't catch the corner right, you like the car was like coming up off the ground. Like there was
Yeah,
one, I forget which driver it was, who like came off the side a little aggressively and just like took it a little wide, and you just see the car like come up, and I'm like,
yeah.
oh
Well, I
man.
remember Logan Sargent had to do an avoidance during either practice or during qualifying
Yeah.
because of a thing with Lewis and somebody else. Forgot who it was. Tried to do an overtake,
Hmm.
and they didn't see. It was kind of like Logan was the third car in the parade, and nobody saw him, and he had to do a quick avoidance and went going over the curbs and hit the curb, bounced the car, big sparks and everything, and he was
Yeah.
really upset about it. So yeah, no, that was that circuit's a little tight, is why some of the drivers like it because of the speed.
Right.
But yeah, like I said, I talked before, it's a little cringy on the safety side because of the blind corners and stuff. And they got
Right.
so many of these odd corners where they're kind of like cutback corners where you kind of go in and you literally are not going forward after the bend, where like you go basically do a 90 degree and you're running parallel to the racing line, and then you turn back to go forward again.
Hmm.
and it kind of cuts down on some of the speeds there because obviously if you're not moving forward, you're not going as fast because they got them going literally making 90-degree corners through there rather than a chicane where you kind of, they move you a little bit forward on the corner, but you're not going completely forward. So kind of you're reducing forward momentum, but not as much as you would on some of these 90-degree corners. So, but no,
Yeah.
Bierman was great. He was spot on. He was, inch perfect. Didn't hit anything. Didn't hit anybody. Brought the car home safe. I mean, really. I mean, other than maybe just a little bit better on the performance, that they started him on reds instead of everyone else was starting on the intermediates. Sorry,
Hmm.
started him on softs instead of the intermediate tires. They were saying they thought they wanted to get him some grip and some confidence in the early stages. The
Yeah.
problem is that kind of offset his strategy a little bit differently than everybody else, and it kind of put him in a little bit of a hole because he had to go longer on the hards and come in early. So luckily they got the safety car. I think it was on lap 9 with the accident.
Right.
So with Stroll running it off into the barrier. I love the line with Stroll, like, "Can you bring it back?" And he's like, "No, I just effing put it into the wall."
Yeah, that was
Like,
great. That
yeah,
was great.
okay, Lance, don't worry
Yeah.
about it. Like, yeah, Lance wasn't going to be worrying about it at that point. He
I know.
didn't care.
I know we had talked about it too last Friday because it was right after qualifying, but how like Nico was looking good early on, and I forget what the reasoning was. I forget like the circumstances around it, but proved to be true that like
Yeah,
he had a really good race on Saturday.
yeah, no, he did. But again, he got a little help from his teammate. He got a little help from his friends on that one.
Yeah,
And yeah, and then it's a question of, yeah, was that legit? I mean, he basically, Magnussen held everybody up for about, about 50 of the 54 laps for the most
best
part, including
offense to get
Albon.
defense.
Yeah, and there are a lot of drivers that are really mad about it. But it was funny because I seen most of the drivers were like, well, yeah, I probably would have done the same thing for my team.
Right.
I'm sure that if you'd given Logan Sargent the opportunity to get Albon points, I'm sure they would have had him do the same thing,
Absolutely.
especially for those back, especially for Haas. And
Right.
that the new guy's got to want to make an impression on Gene.
You're right.
He's kind of he wasn't the guy that was really second in command. He's kind of like the guy that was third or fourth on the totem pole.
Right.
So he wasn't the commercial director, he wasn't the technical director, he was the trackside engineer. So he's a senior guy, but he's not, it wasn't like the VP, the number 2 guy in command came in, like the COO replacing a CEO type of
Right.
situation.
Right.
So they kind of got through the scratch. Well, why did he get going? Now, of course, the technical director got booted out. And I don't think they have a commercial director. So I guess in a sense, he was the number 2 guy at the point. But, for him getting a point, that's got to look really good for Gene. Though I think that Gene's really in this more than just getting 1 point here and
Yeah.
there. He wants,
Yeah.
he wants to be midfield. He basically wants to be 7th, 6th, 7th, 8th type of thing, not
Mhm.
9th, 10th. Definitely not 10th, but not,
Yeah.
9th, 10th. So,
Well,
so
I'm sorry, Haas. That's not happening anytime soon.
no, not unless they get some technical wizardry in there and
Yeah.
hire some top talent from Red Bull or Ferrari or someone like that. I mean, they seem to get some access to some of the Ferrari brain trust, but
Mhm.
Ferrari's not going to give them everything for they're not going to give them the real secrets because
Right.
those go on the Ferrari. You
Right.
know, that's a huge operation. But no, but it's good for Haas to get a point. Certainly help them, and it certainly gives them, it gets them up there. For the early of the season, but 1 point, I don't think the way this season's going to shake out in the end, I don't think 1 point's going to wind up getting them out of 10th. I think if they
Yeah.
finish the year at 1 point, they're going to be in 10th because Williams will score some points along the way. Albon on certain tracks can be really quick,
Mhm.
top 10 quick. So he's definitely, scoring points. Then again, you generally get a couple of races a year where you get some sort of weird incident where, there's a weird, there's a, like 6, 7, 8 take each other out in a turn 1 corner.
Right.
And, maybe Perez has a mechanical issue or they've got a pit stop error and it takes them 30 seconds to do a pit stop.
Mhm.
And, you could never discount Ferrari's ability to screw a situation up.
No,
That's just always there. Lance Stroll's
absolutely.
got the ability to put it in the wall at any point, as we've seen. So,
Absolutely.
and you never know when Merck's going to get something wrong and they're going to have a mechanical problem. So, yeah. So, but I think you're going to get teams that'll score points. Alpine looks solid last right now. I'm sorry, I'm not picking on the French, but
Man, I like truly felt bad because I for the second straight week I bet on using underdog pick'ems. I had
oh,
Logan to finish I think it was like 18 and a half or worse, so like 19th or 20th. Because I was like, oh, the only way that doesn't happen is if there are accidents. And then like Gasly and Stroll in the first like 10 minutes of the race are both out. But I mean, Gasly, I feel like we hadn't even seen 2 turns yet, and Gasly was already like, it was box, box, box,
Yeah.
box.
Well, it was on the grid, coming to the grid. He was saying,
Yeah,
like, he can't get the car. The transmission's bad. I can't get the car to shift. Yeah, that team is just a dumpster fire right now. And like, what we've seen there. I mean, what do you call a good week for Alpine? Nobody quit this week, or at
nobody
least
quit
nobody we
this
know of him. Nobody important seemed to quit this week,
for the
or at
first
least,
for the
yeah,
first week this season.
yeah.
Nobody.
That's a win for them.
Yeah.
Nobody quit after a race weekend. So yeah, I mean, yeah, the bar's real low at Alpine.
God.
I don't think the free baguettes are really getting it cut at Alpine right now because
Yeah,
of
and
this problem.
I don't see any like real path forward this season. Like it
No,
does feel like
no.
they are just going to get punched in the face every
Well,
week.
yeah, evidently the chairman of Renault with like 18 vice presidents showed up at the race. So which was again, people thought, like the media people, that was quite hilarious that somehow bringing 18 vice presidents
That'll
from
fix
an
it.
automaker we're gonna come out somehow gonna fix the team in a weekend or something. It's like you just don't get it, and that's why people are curious or wondering about even Audi coming in
Hmm.
with their muscle and their experience racing experience. What if they're going to be able to make a dent? Because I mean, there was a famous one 15 years ago. Toyota jumped into Formula One with $1 billion commitment. They'd won World Rally Championships. They'd won Le Mans. Formula One was their next goal,
Hmm.
and they spent about 8 years in it, and it was an absolute disaster. They did
Yeah.
not win anything. They might have got some podiums out of it. I think 2 or 3 podiums. I want to say maybe a couple more at most, but it was a disaster. It was a billions and billions of dollars disaster for Toyota. It was the largest motor company in the world, and they couldn't make it work.
Wow.
It's difficult. It's extremely difficult.
Yeah.
Elon Musk wants to say space is hard. Formula One is hard. Probably not
Yeah.
quite as hard as space, because it's a little bit more
But
forgiving.
it's up there. I
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
no, that's it. You finishing last doesn't kill people. In space, you can kill people. So
That's true. I was looking at I was trying to see if there were any other takeaways on Saudi Arabia before we like move on. The one other thing that stood out to me was like RB really had a rough go at it too. Especially with Yuki starting ninth, and I think Yuki kind of got screwed a little bit on the restart that they had or on the safety car. I think that like hurt Yuki a little bit more than some of the other ones because I think he was running around 9th, 10th, or 11th at that time. But Daniel just at like no point was competitive in this one. Like he was
no,
he was floating towards the back. I mean, Sargent passed him, so like that tells you how the race went.
yeah, and he said that they've identified like 10 components or 10 areas on the car where they know they've got problems, and then they're going to be working on specifically. Of course, there's no time frame because Daniel's not an aerodynamicist and he can't fix the problems himself. So they're going to have to work on them. And again, whether that's something that shows up in at Imola
Yeah.
or before that is going to be the question. And so yeah, it wasn't a great day for Red Bull. I think Yuki got kind of screwed over with the whole Magnussen thing. I think
Yeah.
he was,
Oh
because I
God.
believe he
Yeah.
was the one that finished 11th or 12th behind where it was behind Magnussen.
Yuki. Yeah. Yuki was 14th.
Albon and Yuki. Well, Yuki got a 5-second penalty
Oh, got you. Got you.
for unsafe release. In the mail in the at the safety car pit stop.
Okay.
They shoved him out right in front of Lando, I want to say, or Perez, and it was deemed an unsafe release. I think it was Lando, because Lando was yelling on the mic to the team, unsafe release, Yuki, unsafe release type of
And
situation. So yeah, so he got a 5-second penalty. That's why he dropped back. But he was 12th, I think, or whatever it was, behind Magnussen, but not behind the long train that Magnussen. Yeah, because nobody got past Magnussen on that
right.
because Hulkenberg was like 8th, then he fell to 9th, then he was 10th, but Magnussen held everybody else up, so nobody got past 11th on that one. And then Magnussen didn't finish 11th because he got 2 10-second penalties for basically blocking on Yuki. He basically passed Yuki in off track because
Mm.
Yuki had passed him, and he cut the corner because he couldn't make it, and he passed Yuki, and instead of giving the spot back, they charged him 10 seconds,
Oh wow.
which is fine, which in the end put him ahead, but it only put him ahead to 11th. So he incurred 2 of those 10-second penalties. I think one for Albon and one for Yuki. So yeah, I
A
think
menace.
yeah. But the thing was, it's like, okay, well, we're going to do that to basically, the thing is, the theory behind that is, okay, fine, you don't give the place back, we're going to make you go behind them. The
Right.
problem is he kept backing everybody up so much that there's no way that sure, it made that he finished 17th, but nobody was going to get to Hulkenberg, and that was what the goal was. So you kind of got to look at it as far as does the penalty really do what we want the penalties to do.
Right. Right.
So kind
There's
of
a
a
loophole.
yeah, yeah. It's kind of like one of those scenarios that no one really thought about through. Well, what if this happens and then what if that happens? Type of situation, and that's kind of where I think they kind of went. Kind
Yeah.
of kind of where it doesn't make any fit. They may have to look at it again. By the way, one thing that was interesting was Ollie Bierman from all the people, all the well wishers. Sebastian Vettel sent him a text for to basically basically wish him a good race and stuff, an old
Yeah.
Ferrari driver. But yeah, Alpine and Gasly do have the credit of being the first teams the first racers to retire in the 2024 season, because we'd gone all the way through Bahrain without retirement and they couldn't make one lap before they had to park the car.
Oh, they must be thrilled.
Well, the thing, like I said, the thing that's really bad for Gasly and Ocon is these are guys that expected to be in a top 5 team. It wasn't that they expect to be top of the top of the second half of the field. They expected to be like the 15th. They expected
Right.
to be in that top 5. They expected to be competing for podiums and scoring points on a fairly regular basis. Maybe one guy would get in the points, one guy'd have a problem, but they would expect, a significant portion of the races, a third of the races or more, where they'd get double points. And they're not even scaring, they're
No,
not even scaring the
they're
top
gonna need
10.
a 10 car pile up
Ouch.
up top. That's what they're gonna
Ouch.
need. And I truly do not see a path forward to points unless
No.
I mean, I guess Ocon was a little bit more feisty in this one, but I mean, still at no point.
They don't have a car that they can reliably pass anybody with, it looks
Yeah.
like. The car's just not quick. It's overweight. It's like 10 kilos overweight, which is part of why they went with the, with the little bit of paint on it. There's a lot
Yeah.
of bare carbon fiber just to try to save weight. And like I said, if you're, if you're down to not painting your car to save
That's
weight, you've got larger problems.
yeah,
Okay.
I don't understand like how you get to that point. Like it's not like that's so wild to me.
I think
Like
there's something about my understanding was some of it, and it's not, it may not be Alpine specific problem, but somebody commented that because someone was asking why can't you just run last year's car, and evidently there's a roll hoop change this year, or the halo. There's a change to the halo that
okay.
strengthened it, and it's got to pass a higher test. I think that's in relation. Remember. I think we did. I think we did a playback on the race. The race, the British Grand Prix, where Zhou flipped over and
Yeah.
went in the
Yes, we
British
did.
Grand Prix in 2022. I think we were doing a
Yeah.
playback on it. He went flying into the barrier upside down, and actually went over the barrier. He flipped over the barrier
Yeah,
between
there
the
was
barrier and the catch fencing. That's what it
yeah.
was. It
Yeah.
looked really bad, but and they credit because he did so far upside down, and when he hit the barrier over the catch when he hit the catch fencing over the barrier, they were worried about was there going to be intrusion in the cockpit? Was he going to be okay? And the roll,
Right.
the halo held, and he was fine. Popped up out of the car without a problem,
Yeah.
which is what it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be able to survive crash like that and just pop up out of it. But I think there was an enhancement in 24 for strengthening the halos, and I think that's why you can't race the previous year's car unless you went back. And that's also supposedly what's made the cars slightly more heavier for
Gotcha.
their base weight this year. I think they were. I'm not sure if they were given an allowance for it or not, but obviously it's really affected Alpine because they claim to be about 10 between 5 and 10 kilos over. So 11 to 22 pounds over, which you're
Okay.
thinking about a car that's going to weigh 1,100 pounds, maybe 1,100 pounds.
Mhm.
You'd think, well, that would be simple to find, but it's not, because everything is calculated so finely. Like,
Right.
remember we were talking about in the first race, Lewis's seat cracked, and they were
Yeah.
thinking that's because they were trying to cut a millimeter off of the carbon fiber shell for the seat to save that weight. You're
Yeah.
talking ounces on that stuff. So, but yeah, so Alpine's got a fat car, it's an overweight car, and as a fat guy, I can say that. So, but they've got a way to, they've got to find a way to cut it down, and it's not simple. It's not a trivial thing. To find
Right.
that much weight out of a car is time consuming. And the thing is, the more time you spend on the 24 car to make it fast, less time you spend on the 25 car because of
Yeah.
cost caps. Now again, you're gonna have to get the 20. If you can get the 24 car right, you can carry more of it into 25. But once you get to 20, once you get to towards the later part of the season, they're going to want to put that 25 car to bed. And they're going to want to put everything they can in the 26 car, and specifically in the 26 engine. So,
Right.
and you've only got so many dollars to spend on this thing, and that's starts becoming a problem. It's like we talked about before. In the olden days, hey, if they want to write them $100 million check to go burn, to burn, hire as many people as they could to try as many different things they want to throw against the wall to see what works, God bless you. You could do it. Can't
Yeah.
do that anymore. Got
Yeah.
a cost cap. And that's what's, people go, oh, it's great because, that way we don't have to worry about teams, outspending, the smaller teams. It'll be more level playing field. But yeah, you get a level playing field and you get a really level playing field to the point that if you get far behind, you're not going to be able to catch up
Well,
because,
and that's what I was thinking about it too. Like, because do they just focus on next year then? Like, you just kind of like, all right, this is kind of a punt, right? Which is terrible to have that mindset 2 races in. But if they're like, we're not going to be able to make the necessary adjustments this season to this car, so we look forward. But then I immediately am like, how do you maintain any sort of like vibe, any sort of like good energy amongst like not just Pierre and Ocon, but just the people working the pit crew? Like, how you show up to work every day to get your teeth kicked in. I feel like
yeah,
that's probably not the best working environment.
no, not at all. And then these are guys that expect to be challenging for podiums. So, I
Hmm.
mean, you've got to question whether these guys, I'm sure Ocon's agents calling
Oh,
Toto daily
yeah,
because he used to be part of the Mercedes family,
right,
saying, hey, Ocon would be a great fit for your guy. Give him 2 years at Mercedes, and maybe you don't need to bring in Kimi Antonelli, or if you do, give him 2 years to prove himself before you bring in Kimi Antonelli.
right.
You don't want Alfon, you don't want Fernando. He's too old. Ocon. He used to be in your, he used to be your backup driver. He knows your team. He fits in well.
He's
He's not
tall
going to
like Dodo.
be. He's tall like Toto. There you go. He's tall like George.
Yeah, he's
Actually,
tall
that is
like George.
important.
It's
No,
true.
I mean, no, that's funny because I don't know if you remember, but when George filled in for Lewis when he had COVID in 2020 at Bahrain, that was a problem. He didn't fit in the car.
Right.
He has like size 12 feet, and the footwell only handled a size 10 or 11 shoe, and he literally had to put a smaller shoe on. He said his toes were just horribly cramped in there because it
I'm
just didn't
sure.
fit. I mean, and again, that's how compact those cars are, and how
Right.
much they do to save weight and make them aerodynamically efficient and weight efficient on
Right.
on the cars. So yeah, so that was something that was a problem. But seriously, it makes sense because they can do seat positionings better. They can
Mhm.
position airbox intakes better, and it really helps if you've got car. I mean, I don't know what they're doing. Red Bull or what is it? V carb has got to be the worst problem because you got Yuki who's 5 foot nothing,
Right.
and
Right.
Daniel is almost 6 foot.
Right.
And the designers will be going, no, this doesn't work, guys. You got to
Yeah.
give me two drivers that are approximately the same height. You can't give me Laurel and Hardy for
No,
drivers
that's
here.
right. That's right.
Like this just doesn't work, guys. Seriously. So yeah, that's interesting. I didn't really thought about that with Vega. Maybe that's their problem. Maybe the cars are somewhat compromised because you got a guy who's you literally that's got to be one of the largest. Well, it's funny because when DeVries was there last year, I believe it was, and there are accurate stats for some of the stuff through the 60s and 70s and such minute stuff as driver height and stuff.
Right.
And of
Right.
course, their PR teams would always exaggerate because you want to be taller and stuff.
Right.
I exaggerate mine anytime I can to be taller. And Mike, you're a basketball
I'm,
player. I'm sure
yeah.
you may
I,
fudge a little bit.
yeah. Of course. Of course.
So, but yeah, there weren't. But it was rumored that that was the shortest driver combination in Formula One history last year.
Pierre and Yuki.
No,
Oh.
Yuki and DeVries.
Oh, when that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, when they started last year. So yeah,
Yeah.
it was the shortest driver combination. But like I said, that makes it great for the team because they can build a car around a guy on two
Right.
drivers that are practically the same height. It actually does matter, especially when you have air intakes now. So a little bit of
Funny.
scientific engineering
I didn't
there.
even think about that.
But one of the questions is, what have we learned through the first two races? Like we said, Alpine's a dumpster fire.
Yeah.
Red Bull seems strong. Ferrari, and I mean, it's pretty much. I think it's going to be pretty much throw a, you can throw a hat over any of the three teams between Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren, and then
Mhm.
maybe Aston Martin in there too on good days. You really have a segmented top five and a bottom five,
Yeah.
and Alpine's at the bottom. They're racing a Haas for last. VCarb's a work in process, and the rest, and Williams still hasn't really shown itself. And from there, we never know where we're going to go.
Yeah,
So
that I was thinking about it like well, what did we learn? It really does feel like we're just gonna, at least for the foreseeable future, like the next handful of races, we'll see movement within the tiers, but there's clear tiers.
yeah, until someone really, yeah, and yeah, and unless somebody really get, unless Aston Martin really gets something wrong on their updates like they did last year and they didn't do well,
Yeah.
or Williams hit something, and don't discount Williams.
Yeah, they've been feisty.
Yeah, and Valves is really, and it was interesting. I mean, I knew a little bit of, I knew a fair amount about Val's when he moved over to Mercedes from his work. I mean, moved over from Mercedes over to Williams.
Hmm.
But watching it on DTS, yeah, I mean, he really, it was funny watching Albon with that. It was like, we talk about, well, no, we're gonna, we want to be a team for championship, and Albon just starts laughing at him,
Right.
and he's like, I'm like, wow, it's like, I don't sure that would really. I wonder if he's got in the back of his mind, this isn't the driver I really want long term. Bless him now for being there, but long
Right.
term, I'm not. I want a Fernando. I want someone who really believes I can win championships and I can drag this team up.
Right.
And
Right.
and then Albon really Albon kind of realized that he wasn't joking. He wasn't just giving a BS. He's serious
He had to pull
about
that
it.
together
And then he
quickly.
kind of and then Albon kind of serious up like, oh, okay. I don't know
Yeah.
if he
Well,
realized like, well, hey, that would be cool. Or
yeah.
maybe I shouldn't be laughing at my team boss. He tells me I want to build
I
him a
want to win.
championship winning car. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or it's kind of like, yeah, we know we're not going to win. We just kind of show up every week and we get
Right.
points for doing good. And that's a win for us. And
Right. Right.
type of thing. But we're here for we're here for the racing type of stuff. So, but yeah, I mean, again, we'll see 3 races. I don't expect a lot of change in the next 3 races unless something odd happens because these are not going to be races we expect upgrades yet. But Imola could be very different. Could be a lot of changes there. So, and if you want to join in with us, you can.
Yep.
And Mike's going to drop a link in there for F1 Fantasy League.
Yep.
You can
It's
join the team. It's what's our league called? Team Hold.
Yeah, I think it's just called Team Hold.
Team Hold F1 League.
Yep.
Join us, and you can match your wits against Mike and myself, which really isn't too tough for me personally.
Well,
Sometimes for us to get, you guys can pick better than we do on this.
like I said, I still had Gasly. I had Gasly and Stroll in the lineup last week.
Oh, it's okay. I can top you. I had Signs and didn't replace him. I thought they auto replaced them, but evidently they've changed that.
Interesting.
They don't auto replace anymore, so I got 0 points for Signs being in there.
Brutal.
So I was a little ticked about that. It's funny because I have 2 teams, and the team that didn't have Sainz scored the same amount as the team with Sainz because Sainz got 0 points. So I screwed that up pretty badly. So top tip, folks, check your team every week, and
Right.
even and there is no auto replacement evidently anymore. So that's
Well, it was tough. It was tough too because the schedule shift for the first.
Yeah, that too. Yeah,
that's
it was a busy week. I was working the weekend, so
Yeah.
I didn't get to watch the race until Saturday afternoon. So,
Yeah.
hey, but so be it. Again, it's only a fantasy league. It's no thing. It's not like it's big money on it.
Right.
So, all right. So going into the news of the week. So we talked about Ollie Berman. Great showing, finishing 8th, driver of the day. But going forward, what exactly does this mean to him? Because obviously trying to get into Ferrari seat, it's going to be a pretty difficult thing going forward because they're committed for a long term between Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc. Now, in the short term, you can farm him out to Haas, but I mean, it sounds like you've got at least 25, 26, and probably 27 already locked up for drivers at Ferrari. You can't send him there for 3+ years. That's not going to work because he's going to get tired of it unless they're, can you loan him out to somebody else who's not a Ferrari team? Well, they're not really too thrilled about, they're not going to be too thrilled about getting a guy who could be feeding secrets back to Ferrari. That was the problem when Albon had to be released from his Red Bull obligations to go to Williams because they just wouldn't take him. And the same thing with Ocon when he went to Alpine, or it was then Renault from Mercedes. They had to release him from his Mercedes contract. Now, I believe Toto Wolff still manages him, which is why he still might be an inside track for Lewis's seat in 2025. But it's questionable. Unfortunately, the kid's got a bright future, but where's it going to be? Because the Haas team has said, well, we're kind of happy with our drivers at 25. Now, I think that's kind of a negotiating point, and I think if you bring some money along or something, or maybe some, you'll loan us some more aerodynamicists to fix our crappy car. I think that Haas can probably be bought off. I think Gene, you take that deal to Gene, I think Gene will say, yeah, we don't love those guys that much. And I was talking with a friend of mine who's an F1 addict too. And we were talking about, okay, so if you get rid of somebody at Haas, who do you get rid of? I think you get rid of Magnussen, even though you get Bill's loyalty points for his work last week.
Yeah.
I think Hulkenberg's probably the faster of the 2 drivers. I think he's more aggressive. I think he really wants it a little bit more than Magnussen. Remember, Magnussen had already quit F1 once, and it wasn't by his own, actually it kind of was by his own, idea. He went off and did endurance racing and was starting to do, endurance racing when the problem came up and they had to basically replace.
I honestly thought Magnussen was more of like a placeholder than anything else. I didn't think that he would be there long term. So every time he comes back, I'm surprised.
And I'm sure he's happy to sign the contract and take the
Sure,
whatever it
absolutely.
is, $4-6 million a year. He's not making 20 or anything,
Right, but still.
but still, if someone has opportunity, do you want $4 million next year to run, to go to 24 glamour spots and run a race car and
Yeah.
be idolized by everybody? Yeah, I think I'll take that gig. I think, what? Let me check my calendar. Nope, I don't have anything better. I'm in. Sign me up. I'm in. I don't have anything better to do. So yeah, I would suspect they would keep Hulkenberg and match him up with Bierman if that's the way it works out. And again, I think the only reason I might keep Magnussen, I think he might be a better guy to mentor, to mentor Ollie. I see Hulkenberg being a really serious guy who's out for himself to be a good
Right.
driver. That doesn't make him a bad guy. It just
No.
makes him a serious person. But maybe it's kind of like, look, here's the deal, Hulkenberg. We're keeping you. Kevin's going, but it's under the banner. You're going to be mentoring Ollie. You're going to be,
Right.
you're going to be sharing your secrets as whatever you can to help the kid out. So
Right.
if you agree to that,
Cool.
then
We'll
we'll
have
keep
you.
you. Right.
Yeah.
You can stay. Otherwise, then we'll bring Kevin back. So it's kind of like you get the first shot.
Right.
If you choose not to, God bless you. If you got a better seat, if you're going to replace Logan Sargent at Williams and you think that's a better gig, not going to
Yeah.
stand in your way. Or bring Kevin back to mentor him. So be it. Or
Yeah.
if it's not going to be, like I said, if it's not going to be Kimi Antonelli, because remember Antonelli's only 17. He's actually a year younger than Bierman even is.
Right.
So, but yeah, so we'll have to see what his future is. He's going to do, I think, 6 FP1 sessions for Haas this year. So he's going to get a lot of time in the car. Ferrari's going to get a lot of a lot of data on him, on how he looks. This could have been a fluke. I don't think so. And he'll do his regular Formula 2 campaign also. So the kid will be busy. And they said basically, because they were asked, well, why did you go to him rather than, because you actually have 2 other, Giovinazzi and Schwartzman are also their backup drivers.
Okay.
And they go, why did you go to Bierman? Because he's the least experienced of all of your backup drivers. And they go, well, look, the way we're doing it is if it's an F2 weekend and none of those guys are running endurance racing. If it's an F2 weekend, Bierman's our guy because he's here with F2 and we don't have to bring anybody else along. If it's not one of those weekends, and like, for example, in Japan, it won't be Bierman, it'll be Giovinazzi because I believe because there's no F2 in Japan this year. They're not moving the cars over to F2. So instead of dragging him along, they'll drag along Giovinazzi. But I believe Bierman, because I think there's an F2 race in Australia, that Bierman will be their guy in Australia. So it'll vary from race to race. And if there's not an F2 race, the other thing is, but Bierman will be on the simulator doing the work like the Mick Schumacher does for Mercedes back at the factory. So he's going to be running a lot of weekends this year. He's an 18-year-old kid. He can afford, he's got the energy to do it. So he's going to be running F2, backing up F1, or he's going to be in the simulator. So he's going to probably be running 30 weeks this year nonstop, which is great for him because every second he sits either in a simulator or in an F1 car, an F2 car is experience that makes him a better driver. So
yeah, absolutely.
So much for that. One of the things I was going to bring up on this thing was, well, most of the drivers, they said, agreed that, yeah, if I was in the same position as Magnussen, I would have done the same. And I can understand. And the principles are kind of like, I could understand Haas doing it. It still didn't make them happy. They were pretty angry about a lot of, they were frustrated. Yuki was frustrated, obviously, because, well, anything frustrates Yuki.
Right.
And Albon was ticked about it because they wanted, again, that Williams Haas battle right now, it was figured they were going to be the 2 guys battling out for 10th. Whereas Alpine said, no, hold my beer. We'll take over that role from you guys.
Yeah.
You guys can fight for 9th instead because we appear to be the worst team on the grid right now. So that's why Albon was ticked off about it. There's a question of sportsmanship, but it's racing, guys. You're there to win.
Yeah, I mean,
or finish 10th in the case of winning a point.
In a situation like that, to me, it's up to like what's the governing commission, FIA? Is it?
Yeah, the FIA and the stewards.
Yeah,
They're the people that run the race.
It's up to them, in my opinion, to figure out how to handle it then. Because like if they are running with it, if we're breaking like unwritten rules, I'm not here for it. I'm sorry. Like this is on the FIA. It's their job to come up with like the appropriate punishment or whatever to make sure that this doesn't happen regularly.
Yeah, and then this is, I mean, this isn't the first time this has kind of happened. Magnussen was a little bit more aggressive, you might say, than normal. But
Hmm.
outside of that, it was pretty much this happens. You'll get a driver. It's maybe not always teammate where you can have Magnussen just holding up a big line of cars. So, again, something to bring up, something to think about, and I'm sure something they'll be watching. This happens more than once or twice. I think they might talk about something. Maybe it'll come at the drivers' meeting in Australia. Hard to say. So, moving along, quiet week on this. Or Mike, do you have anything else on that? I did want to
No,
cut
no,
you.
no. I thought that
Okay,
was it.
quiet week on the scandal front. Though we did have a little bit of news that you and I were talking about in the back channel before we started on the old Christian Horner. I was trying to come up with names for it. I was trying to Horner Gate. Someone, my friend said Horny Gate, but I don't think I really want to do that.
Yeah, yeah. Like
So
that's a good joke you could send in the text
yeah,
thread, but maybe not like publicly name something,
yeah,
you know?
exactly. The British press are brutal though, so you never know with them
That
coming
is
up with
true.
it.
That is true.
They are brutal, but quiet week. Evidently, Yas Verstappen will be in Australia, and evidently, this is kind of it's kind of turning out to be a Max Yas and Helmet and Austria versus Christian Horner and the tie function,
Hmm.
the tie holders. Importantly, the tie holders hold 51%. The managing director of Red Bull was there. Marco at first said that, he may be suspended, so look for something. They were launching an investigation into Helmut Marco because there's rumors that he may have been the person that leaked or that helped the person who brought the allegation forward. He may have helped her leak the alleged
Right.
text and the alleged photos. So that's why he may be under investigation. And so people are speculating, well, could he be removed? Max is saying, well, if Helmut goes, I go. And then Helmut said, evidently, after meeting with the managing director, that, oh, no, I'll be staying. So I guess he may be threatened, like, look, if you throw me out, you're going to lose Max. And
So
go ahead.
one of the surprising things to me about, I mean, all of it's bad, but
Yeah.
one of the surprising things that's not really about the allegation that I was just thinking about, had Horner and Max, at least from what I had seen, seem to have had like a
Yes.
pretty good relationship.
Yeah. This is on that aspect. It's surprising. And
Yeah.
go ahead. Yeah. Go
No,
ahead.
that was kind of what I was bringing up because I
Yeah.
was like, were there things that were just that we didn't know about or that I didn't know about, or is this all pretty like are people learning this in real time?
I wouldn't necessarily. I wouldn't. I'm taking this as more of a Jos Verstappen thing, trying to manipulate Max,
Okay.
kind of being the Svengali behind him.
Hmm.
Max wants to race. I don't think Max really cares.
Yeah.
He's loyal to Marco, to Helmet, because he brought him up. And obviously, he's loyal to his dad because it's his dad, and his dad got him
Right.
into racing. And yeah, it's his father. You can't really question that for the
Right.
most part. But yeah, I think this is Jos pulling more strings than anything else. And I don't know why. Jos was a. Uh, Jos was Kevin was Hulkenberg, was Nico Hulkenberg. He actually partnered Michael Schumacher in
Okay.
Schumacher's early days, but never beat Schumacher. I mean, he was at one point in a up and coming racer. He just never panned out. Whether it would be the cars he was in, or so. Remember in those days, the cars mattered a lot more because
Right.
there would be multi-second differences in qualifying at times between really really cruddy cars, and there was no limit on cars.
Mm.
There were races in the time that he ran where you had to pre-qualify. You had to come out at 9 o'clock on Friday morning, and okay, fine, guys, there's 6 cars for 2 slots, and that gets you into the qualifying. That'll get you into the race. So you didn't even sure if you showed up, you'd even get into a race because they had so many cars that were trying to qualify in those days. Now, a lot of times you had teams that lasted a season. We had one team that lasted, I think, 8 races in like 1993 or something. So it was a lot more. It was a lot less regulated than it is today. I mean, it's a proper regulated sport with expectations. That's $1 billion business, and it wasn't $1 billion business in those days. It was
Right.
growing. I mean, it was a good business. It was very popular worldwide, but it
Right.
wasn't the sport and the
Maybe family.
phenomenon that it is today. So,
Yeah.
but he was a guy that had opportunities, and they just didn't pan out. So I don't know if he's a frustrated racer who thinks that he should get more say because he's Max Verstappen's father or what. You never know what the motivations for some of these things are behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's happy his son is a world champion. That makes him proud. But is there something with him and Helmet that they want? Well, we should be running Red Bull, or because there's a question. Once Dieter Mateschitz died last year, did Helmet Marko think that he was going to be
Next in
named
line.
to basically to run all of Red Bull Racing? Because basically he is an employee of Red Bull Austria who's like a consultant, because I don't believe that actually, Christian worked for him. He worked for Dieter.
Okay.
So is it like, well, I should have been the boss and I'm not, and this is how I'm going to wind up Red Bull or what? Again, it's like you get, and he's 80. It's time for him to retire. I don't know why he's really working this hard on conspiracy
I
theories.
know.
It's
That
like,
is,
dude, you're 80, retire, go what, lead a nice life, retire,
yeah.
come to races, do whatever you want, do consulting, do driver consulting, whatever you want.
Yeah.
But, let someone else move along and don't, and again, we talked about last week, there's word that they were already, before Dieter Mateschitz' death, they were working on spinning basically the Red Bull Racing, Red Bull Technologies out
Right.
to a separate company of which Christian would have had an equity stake in.
Right.
And it had supposedly been agreed between the Thai owners and the Austrians that they were going to do this. And they would retain a majority stake in it, but Christian would have got a little bit of a taste, kind of like Toto did, where Toto bought his own
Right.
way in to Mercedes type of thing. Because he's been there for many years, and I'm sure he wants equity. And again, evidently, there's a rumor that was part of the problem with Gunter and Gene, was that Gunter wanted some equity too in the team. He wanted a small equity stake, and Gene said that's not happening. So these types of things happen when you start seeing people getting very rich off of
Hmm.
equity stakes in teams. That's not uncommon for, in business, it's not uncommon for owners and stuff in American companies, especially in tech companies, to
Right.
have substantial stakes in things that they founded. So there could be that. And maybe they told Helmut, look, we're going to do this deal and you're not getting any equity. You're going to retire. And maybe that's why he's mad. Maybe he thought he deserved equity in Red Bull Technologies type of situation. His payout at 80 was due type of thing. You never know because of all the behind the scenes stuff. I'm sure in the end of this, there's going to be a great book written about this.
Yeah, for
Or a
sure.
great documentary. I'm sure there's a Netflix would love to bid on
Well,
making the documentary out of this whole thing when it's done.
yeah, I'll be curious to see how much they cover it next year too, because I want, like, just in the Drive to Survive, if that'll
Yeah,
be.
we'll have to see where this goes. That'll probably
Yeah.
determine what gets covered going forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and let's see. So, one of the things that's also, I mean, Mike, anything you want to add on this whole mess?
No, no, no. I think we
Okay. So,
enjoyed
one
it.
of the things that has been rumored again, and it actually was something that I actually had thought about before I heard there was a rumor about it, was you have to question. So, Alpine, because they're a dumpster fire. Again, the CEO showed up with 18 vice presidents to see what they can do to find out on what's going on. Are we going to fix this type of thing? Um, for a little bit of history on Alpine, which is owned by Renault. It used to be Renault Racing for years and
Hmm.
years. Renault has come and gone over 35, 40 years and the fact they were, I believe their engine in the car that's in my background was a Renault engine at one point in that yellow camel car that Ayrton Senna drove. That they've been both a manufacturer and an engine supplier and not necessarily the same, meaning they have been at times where they have not built their car, but they've supplied engines as an engine supplier and not raced in there and have come in and raced again and have bought teams and taken them over and started racing again. So Renault has a history of providing, and I think at one point they provided engines at one point to almost half the grid. I think at one point because they
Wow.
really had a really really good engine that everybody wanted. It was the top engine in Formula One at a at a time 15 20 years ago. So it would not be it would not be out of the question to see them either after this year or at some point just pack it up and say, look, we will sell Andretti or somebody, could be Michael Andretti, the team. We will provide the engines and we will stay in Formula One as an engine provider. And we'll sell our engines to anybody else up to maybe one or two more teams that want an engine. So if you want to get rid of Mercedes, you want a Renault engine, though it's the slowest engine or it's the weakest engine on the grid, we'll do that. But it does a couple of things. It gets Alpine out of this. Again, even with the cost cap, I'm not sure if they're able to if they're making a profit on this. Not they might be now on this. But remember, a lot of stuff doesn't get covered in the cost cap. The executive salaries don't, driver salaries don't. So you got to throw anywhere's. Those guys are probably 8, 10, 12, maybe $15 million. They're both winners of Formula One races. So they're not $4 million drivers. They're probably 10 to $15 million drivers. That's 30 million. I don't think they're paying their management much because they already threw out most of their management. Most of their management's Renault guys, so it's coming out of Renault's budget, I'm guessing.
Right.
But you're probably factoring in another 30 million. And I'm not sure how much of the engine costs are able to defray from that. So there's another probably 30 to $50 million possibly in costs that aren't part of the cost cap. And if they're not making 30 or $50 million profit, they're losing money. And a lot of the major manufacturers talked about it last week have gone into EVs. They have plateaued out. And I'm not sure that Renault has actually made that jump into EVs yet. And they may need to spend billions in that. And you're looking at the money you're spending on Formula One going, we're finishing last. Do we really want to own a car? Do we really want to own an F1 team that finishes last? I'm trying to impress people on why they should buy our cars because of our racing technology. Racing technology
Right.
last. So
Right.
that's not really a winner. Let's dump this thing. Michael Andretti would love to pay me $1 billion plus for it. And we can supply them engines. It gives them a bridge until the Cadillac motors are available in 28. And we still get to keep our name in. And if they somehow turn this thing around, we can still take credit for supplying the engine to a good team, and win-win. It solves the FIA's problem. It's some Formula One's problem because Gene Haas team doesn't want to sell. Williams has got new investors, so they're not available, and you've got the Andretti problem out there because of what happened to them. So,
Right.
Mike, what's your take on that?
I bet it, like, if I agree, like, this isn't how you want to be advertising your product, is just by getting your teeth kicked in. I wonder if this has to, like, when we get to the summer break, how many races in is that typically? Is that like 10 to 12?
This year, it'd be between 11 and 13. Yeah, exactly.
So I would imagine if this is, if we're like 10 races in, 11 races in, and this is still like they haven't accrued a point yet, I bet this conversation starts snowballing a little bit harder, and there's probably more pressure put on, because I would imagine, like, right now they're like, well, it's too early, it's a weird season, like, give us some time, we still believe in our drivers, our product, blah blah blah. But all it takes is like a conversation around a historically bad season, and then the press starts picking up on it a little bit, and I would imagine that convo would start gaining steam. But I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, and I'm sure that Michael Andretti probably already picked the phone up to, and call those guys. Hey, you guys, you got a buyer if you guys want to talk about it. I'm not saying you want to sell at this point, but if you ever consider it,
Right.
Don't lose my phone number. We'd like to talk about something with you guys.
Yeah.
I think so. The thing is, we'll wrap it up on this. One thing I thought was the thing that's interesting is they threw Otmar out because they didn't think Otmar was making progress fast enough, and they've gone backwards in throwing Otmar out.
Right.
So I think that discussion you're talking about may happen sooner than later, because I don't know what they're going to do to fix this car. This doesn't seem to be easily fixable from my experience and from what I know about this.
Well,
so
it reminds me a little bit of, like, in the basketball world, where, like, if a GM fires 3 coaches, the GM's next. Like, you can only get away with firing so many people before you are now held responsible. And so, like you said, right, you remove someone.
That's a really good take.
Yeah, you remove someone, you start doing worse, and it's like, well, now we gotta blame someone, and there's no one else left but you.
Yeah, we'll change everything. What's left? Oh, you. I'm sorry, you've got to go. Yeah,
right.
And then they may decide, look, we just got to sell this thing. So it's because it's just a dumpster fire. Yeah, you're right. No, that's a really good take and a really good analogy for that, because we just got to get out of this because this is just a dumpster fire for us.
Right.
And we can we can put our talents to other areas that are going to generate better returns for shareholders, because again, these are publicly traded companies. So
right.
The ones
well,
that are
like
tied
you
to auto
said
companies.
too, there's a path for the next few years to still be able to be involved, like you said, without.
You're not giving up on Formula One. We're not, we didn't abandon Formula One. We'll do it as an engine provider.
Right. And then you'll only get, like, the good press of it. You won't get the bad press. It'll now be whoever is taken over's responsibility to perform well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, I think we've done about an hour.
Let's do it. Good stuff. We'll be. I dropped the link one more time, so go ahead, join the F1 League if you haven't.
F1 Fantasy.
And we will. I guess we'll be back next week.
We should be back next week. Yeah, we'll have the run up. Well, actually, we'll have done qualifying, and we'll be heading to the run up about depending on what time we do this, about 8 or 9 hours later, or 9 or 10 hours later for the Australian Grand Prix.
Awesome. Yeah, I can't wait. That's always one where I think the last year I was at a wedding, and I remember leaving like it was like midnight when I got back, and the race was just starting. I was like, all right.
Exactly.
Good times. But yeah, make sure you join the Fantasy League. James, as always, man, this is a pleasure. I really enjoy doing this show. It's a lot of fun.
Appreciate it too.
Next Friday, we're out of here. Have a good week,
everybody. Have a good week.
Tickets.